Welcome back to a brand new episode of What's New in Beauty. My name is Nia Lee, and I'm super excited to have you guys here. If it's your first time tuning in, this is essentially the beauty podcast where I love talking about new and exciting things happening in the beauty industry, and of course, sharing my social media marketing strategies, techniques, tactics, and of course, just adding my 2 cents to it. Now, I know it's been more than a minute, but to be quite honest, y'all, outside of the fact that your girl was busy working, taking brands, social media presence to the next level, I was honestly very, uninspired by the beauty industry. Honestly, last year, if I'm being completely honest, I just wasn't interested in a lot of the launches. I felt like a lot of brands were kind of doing the same things in and out. And it really is interesting to kind of see where the beauty industry has kind of been, because 2024 was interesting. I feel like 2023, a lot more people had a lot more hope about what the beauty industry was honestly going to be about. I feel like we were coming off the pandemic. There was a lot of people that were really kind of, changing how they kind of view beauty. Wellness definitely took, a full steam ahead. But the beauty industry as a whole, it's been tough. Like, honestly, I feel like, especially in the time period of me working with some incredible brands, I've seen a lot of brands, go under, close, quote unquote, file for bankruptcy. And it's just really interesting to see, and primarily I'm seeing it more on the indie side. I'm not necessarily, and I could honestly also say like JLo Beauty is not in Sephora anymore, but it's little things like that where I've just kind of seen the decline in certain things / wasn't really inspired with a lot of the things that were being launched / the news that was happening. It felt like private equity kind of took over the beauty industry a lot. And it was really evident to me, the brands that were kind of doing things because we know eventually we're going to go ahead and sell, versus let's actually create innovative product and experiences. And, everybody and their mom put all their money into influencer marketing and to experimental things for their brand, concerts, festivals, pop-ups, you name it. But again, it really wasn't really grappling me. And regardless of all that, I wanted to come back and chat with you guys. Here's the thing, right? Even though I'm not talking on this podcast and, having these conversations with you guys, I am still so intrigued with things happening in the beauty industry. I get beauty alerts and insights and news sent to my inbox pretty much every single day. So I'm tapped in, right? I'm fully tapped in. But certain things are just letting me know, is the beauty industry over? Is it a wrap? Are we, and I'm hopeful still, because I love this industry and this is where I've decided to position myself, especially with my business. But at the same time, I'm seeing things happen and I'm like, what is actually going on? And this actually kind of brings me up to my first topic, which is all about Glossier potentially filing for bankruptcy, which is so crazy to me. And we've talked about Glossier a gazillion times on this podcast. And Glossier is such an interesting brand. I remember when I talked about, Emily Weiss stepping away from the company, I think it was back in 2021, 2022, or potentially even 2023. It was interesting. She kind of like slowly exited everything, and the brand definitely went through this kind of change. And it felt like it was kind of scattered all over the place, but I wanted to talk about particularly Glossier on the verge of filing for bankruptcy, which is really interesting to me, because you would think as a brand, like I literally just saw the other day that they are launching this new black cherry line, which is super cool. And, everyone's, and that's the other thing too that I'm noticing, is that a lot of brands are doing very trendy things, and there's nothing wrong with hopping on trends, but it just feels like that's exactly what you're doing. And there really isn't like a crazy amount of attention behind it, and it also kind of feels a little late. You know what I mean? Like, I understand it definitely takes time to create an actual product, but in the height of these trends, I wish brands would, have a little bit of forecasting and realize maybe we need to come out with something, that's limited edition, or maybe we need to come out with something that's really quick, or maybe we need to find a way to capitalize on this earlier rather than later. And I just also don't think Glossier has that type of, even though people love the products and certain things, I remember the bomb.com formula, people wanting that to go back to the original was a big thing at the time. But I also think people today just feel like, I feel like Glossier more than anything relies on nostalgia, and also relies on it being this kind of like OG girl boss, indie brand that went super big. And of course you had the connection to Emily Weiss there as well. And it really just felt like it was like the type of brand for that particular time. And we've kind of gone away from that. And a lot more brands today, I feel like, indie brands are really kind of running things these days outside of, the really, really big brands. But with the really big brands like a Fenty or a Rare or whatnot, like those brands have backing of, huge, huge conglomerates like a LVMH or, a Sephora who, really does help them kind of spearhead. And there's definitely brands who've, been in the indie space and, sold and got successful. I mean, K18 is a brand that comes to mind a lot. But then there's other brands as well, too, that have, celebrity connections or that really big, like I mentioned earlier with, J.Lo Beauty, but then, them not being in Sephora stores kind of makes sense because the brand definitely kind of felt like an afterthought. But anyways, I could talk more and more about this and we can definitely get into it. But I want to talk about this Glossier, this news of Glossier, potentially on the verge of filing for bankruptcy. So I got the news literally in my inbox this morning, and it was pretty much talking about there was a bunch of brands actually that are potentially on the verge of filing for bankruptcy. Hudson's Bay is on the list. I mean, Canadian here, like, am I surprised? Absolutely not. But it's just so crazy to see that these brands are very much kind of there. Everlane was another brand that came up. PacSun was another brand that also came up. And this is all coming down to, this actual platform that is actually looking into the specific insights and data of these brands as well. So according to Retail Dive, more retailers will file for bankruptcy in the year ahead. The question is simply, who will they be? While it's impossible to predict with certainty which businesses will file in a given year, especially as unforeseen circumstances can tip a company over the edge, they've said that, they've actually gathered a list based on Credit Risk Monitor, which is a platform that essentially curates frisk and PACE scores, which measure the profitability of a public or private retailer, respectively, filing for bankruptcy within 12 months. So in this article, they're actually listing out essentially how they kind of measure risk or how they're coming to these scores as well. So obviously, whether you're at a 10 for both the frisk and the pace, you're essentially, in the standstill of the probability of bankruptcy within 12 months. Best, and then obviously you have the worst, which is, number one. In this essence, the public retail sphere, that organization listed 10 noteworthy actual retailers and brands with either a 4% to 10% chance of filing for bankruptcy or a 10 to 50% chance based on their Frisk score. And the Frisk score uses metrics like stock market capitalization and volatility, agency ratings, financial ratios, and click patterns from credit managers to estimate a retailer's profitability of filing for bankruptcy within the next year. So Wayfair's on here, Kirkland is on here, a bunch of brands are on here, a bunch of companies as well too. But I wanted to specifically speak to Glossier because this to me is so, I don't want to say crazy, but it's more of an indication to me of what kind of happens when a brand loses its founder, which is very much at the helm of everything that they are doing. So much so that this brand is not even really what it is anymore. And you can just tell they're doing a lot of things for money and eventually, to sell the company, right? Or to honestly sometimes dismantle the company from the inside out. Like, it's unfortunate, but we hear about it happening in private equity more than anything. There's this sense of loss of character and love and, understanding. And obviously the focus now is money. How do, these investors or these companies, how do we get our money back, right? What are we going to do to get our money back? Sometimes not even realizing you're completely losing what this brand is really about. And I understand people need to make money, but when it seems like you're just doing things for a cash grab or you're just doing things because it's going to make you money, especially in an economy now more than ever in 2025, where people are being very, very diligent about where they are spending their money because, again, the average person today doesn't give a shit about a new launch or a new product if they need to afford groceries and other basic necessities to, live a life, right? And, we talk about the lipstick index a lot as well too, because usually that's an indicator of, even in the essence of recession and hard times, if I still have the money or the funds to be able to purchase a lipstick or, this luxury item for myself, there's still hope there, right? However, what we're noticing now is such a gap between the people that are very, very rich or the people who can afford those luxury products versus the individuals that cannot and, will shop the drugstore and whatnot. But hey, the drugstore is also getting quite expensive as well, too. So let's talk about it, y'all. Glossier essentially made its name, right? Boy Brow was really big for Glossier. The Millennial Pink was really big for Glossier. But again, according to Retail Dive, it ran into challenges kind of further down the line. Now this brand, that was highly Instagrammable and highly almost like this cult-like following, they closed 2 permanent stores before kind of re-entering the physical retail space in 2021. There's been growing pains as well too, again, when the founder, of course, Emily Weiss, and the CEO left in 2022, as I mentioned. There's been 2 rounds of layoffs hitting the company in a matter of months. And as well too, they tried to do a wholesale deal that I'm reading here. Now this actually came just before actually Emily Weiss actually departed the company. But it was a huge mistake that they're actually kind of marking here as well too. And they said over the past 2 years, they've prioritized certain strategic projects that distracted us from laser focus we needed to have on our core business, which is scaling our beauty brand. We also got ahead of ourselves on hiring. These missteps are on me. This is actually a rep from Glossier that's actually speaking to this as well too. There's also been a revamp in their C-suite. But right now it says that their PACE score is of 1 on the credit risk monitor, which represents a roughly 10 to 50% chance of filing for bankruptcy in the next 12 months. And it says also that Glossier has been making payments late, according to credit risk monitor. So overall, y'all, this is very much a wake-up call, I think, for a lot of brands today. I mean, again, I pay attention to everything, but I'm fully engulfed in the indie beauty space, and those are a lot of the clients I end up having as well too. And I love indie beauty. I think that's where the creativity lies. I think that's where the innovation is. The only difference is it's really hard sometimes to scale a brand. And then on top of that, it's really hard to then say, okay, we're going to bring investors in. We're going to do private equity. 9 times out of 10, yes, the founder is still quite present, but the business completely loses its soul. It completely loses exactly what it's about. And it's interesting because I know brands like Summer Fridays that, obviously have investors and have been doing incredibly well. I believe Marina and Lauren are still CEO and they're still founders. So I think that's like a big part of it as well too. Like, how involved is the founder on the day-to-day? And really not allowing private equity or investors to completely kind of dismantle your business from the inside out, almost to the point where you've lost the soul of what the business is. I mean, Glossier, they announced a partnership with the WNBA. They've done some incredible things, but it just feels like they're just trying to do too much. And it's kind of completely gone away from exactly what the brand is, which, again, Glossier, cult-like, boy brow, millennial pink. It was really for a particular type of customer, right? But the customer today has obviously changed. And a lot more companies today are very, very aware that we need to be diverse and we need to be inclusive. But what we're finding is a lot of brands like a Glossier, for example, have done things quite performatively. And they've done some amazing things. Like they have the Glossier grant. I know they have programs as well, too, that are very specific to BIPOC-owned businesses. But then you hear other BIPOC-owned businesses and founders speak to the fact that, enough accelerators, enough programs, enough mentorship. We need money. And that's kind of where things are currently right now. So, I kind of went off on a tangent, but what I'm saying here is it's not shocking, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do end up filing for bankruptcy, because honestly, this might be the only thing that they need to do to kind of rebuild if they plan to rebuild. I also think the beauty industry, I'm definitely one of those people that never says that the beauty industry is saturated. But today, 2025, do I believe the beauty industry is saturated? Absolutely. Do I think it's saturated with goodness? No, I think it's saturated with a lot of shit. And I think it's saturated with a lot of brands that are in this kind of, private equity space. And we're finding that the brands that have private equity are doing amazing. They get to be everywhere. They are in the retailers. They are showing up. But it just feels like there's no soul behind the brand, right? And at the end of the day, does it all really matter if we're just here for the money anyways, which, again, private equity and investors are. So, prayers up to Glossier, and it'll be interesting to kind of see what happens, especially the year literally just started. So, again, I just saw they recently just launched a new black cherry collection as well too, which a lot of people were interested in. But again, I'm in social, so I'm looking at the comments, I'm hearing the conversations at hand, and people are excited. But there's also still a lot of people that feel like their orders haven't been fulfilled. They feel like, the brand has kind of moved away from exactly what it is about. And they're still trying to, I think, capture this, really youth-like Gen Z audience. They definitely kind of moved away from that millennial consumer base. So I don't know. Should they go back? I kind of sort of think so. I think a lot of brands today, when they kind of go back to their original roots, they then get an opportunity to kind of come to the stage and kind of, go back to what it is that kind of made us what it is. However, how do you do that without being performative, right? That's kind of the tough kind of thing there that you kind of want to get an understanding of, but you're not 1,000% sure. And I don't work for Glossier, so I'm not going to get too specific on what it is that I think they should do. However, my thing is, I just see a lot more brands kind of finding their way into this, only just because the way that the world is working right now is most people, if they are going to purchase products, they're going to purchase things that a lot of influencers are talking about. They're, also the beauty industry is heavily marketing to millennial and Gen Z audiences. There hasn't been a huge push so much on like boomers, for example, but there are brands that definitely exist that are definitely doing their thing and definitely speak to those industries. But I feel like every brand today is only marketing to millennials and Gen Z, more so Gen Z. However, Gen Z is, the most unloyal and disloyal group of consumers, meaning they're willing to try so many different things and they're willing to, experiment and, willing to, so that's why I think newness is important. However, there's no loyalty there, right? The loyalty ends up really coming from your millennial clientele and also potentially your boomer clientele as well too, and customer base. So it'll be interesting to see how things unfold. And I also wanted to also speak to as well the TikTok ban, and what does this mean for the beauty industry? I feel like everybody and their mom is having a bit of a heart attack, and it's one or two. They're either having the heart attack or they are business as usual. And I was reading an article today about, this really viral brand, and they do oral care. And they were talking about how, TikTok, one viral video made our, we had millions of inventory that was ready to go because of TikTok. And so, I'm not going to get too much into the political aspect of everything, but I want to speak to the fact that there are a lot of brands that are going to, I don't want to necessarily say suffer, but they're definitely going to take a hit because TikTok is this channel for them that not only helps marketing, but it also helps with sales, right? Especially with TikTok Shop. And I have clients who are on TikTok Shop as well. However, the platform really does cater to those brands that are doing incredibly well, who are willing to pay the ad money and are willing to put their, their money where their mouth is, and have this really kind of grip on the fact that like TikTok is all about discovery, and it's really about can you get on that For You page, and can you present your brand in a way that's very fun and very, not so polished like you would on Instagram or, Pinterest or something like that. So I wanted to talk about what does this mean for beauty brands, and also just my thoughts on what beauty brands should probably be doing, if not already. First and foremost, now more than ever, I mean, the TikTok ban has been something that's been talked about, I think, for the last 6 months. If that time frame didn't tell you that, or not even that time frame, we've seen platforms completely change or completely, get off the face of the planet. Like, hello, Vine, hello, like, there are so many platforms that people used to love, and cherish that are not here anymore, right? I remember Musical.ly was another big platform. Musical.ly was kind of like the big platform before TikTok, right? But, people weren't necessarily making a whole bunch of money on it, or you couldn't per se. And it's really interesting to me because why you would put all your eggs, or the majority of your eggs in a social media platform that you don't own, I have no idea. However, I understand we use these as resources, we use these as tools, but I always say this to people, and I always mention this as well to clients, is that you should be not everywhere, but you should be exactly where you feel like you're going to be able to reach your clientele. And for a lot of people, TikTok was the platform to reach Gen Z. However, there are so many other platforms that exist that you can go ahead and do that. / if you don't realize at the end of the day that Gen Z is also going to get older and they're also going to have different things that they're going to come to terms with, they're not going to just be that generation, particularly like they're going to have different experiences with product, with shopping, with, discovery. And, you got to understand at the end of the day that like, this group of people that you're marketing to, they're very fickle, and they're also not going to necessarily be loyal to you. So yes, you might get the sales. Yes, you might get that dopamine rush and that hit. However, when you put majority of your eggs in that basket, it's tough because now everyone's kind of, they're mumbling and cackling and scrambling, and they don't even realize that like for the last, 6 or 8 months, or it's probably been even longer, you should have been diversifying your marketing channels 1,000%. Not for nothing, you probably actually should have figured out a way of turning all those followers and turning all those people into actual customers, or at least people on your email list, something that you actually own, right? When you actually have the ability, or, SMS, or, creating your own platform. I know brands who've created their own platform as well too, or things like Try Your Best that, create challenges for people as well. But you have this incubator almost of a community of people that regardless of whatever happens to these social media platforms, you still have access to them, and you still have the opportunity to, let them know what is going on in your business. You can still sell to them. You can still communicate to them. You can still bring them into the fold. So I think more so than anything, outside of the fact that, this ban is potentially going to happen on Sunday, forget putting all your eggs in one basket or your majority of your eggs in one basket. Make sure that you are diversifying the channels that you are on. And more so than anything, make sure that you're actually building this direct network to your customers through email, through SMS, through creating an own app, through, doing things that let you know at the end of the day that regardless if these platforms are here, if they go down, I mean, how many times has Instagram and Meta gone down in the last, 6 months? Everything is unpredictable, right? And where everything is going as well too, it lets you know now more than ever, having a direct contact or having direct communication with your community is more important than ever, right? And I think it's so important that brands understand that, because these platforms also are, they're not, how do I say this? Like, they only really work when we are as active on it, right? And I'm not sitting here and saying you can't be active on it and there's no need for it. However, every platform has a purpose, right? Every platform has a specific thing that it's meant for, which is why I always say you should kind of switch up your strategy depending on the platform. However, there are certain platforms that you really shouldn't only kind of focus particularly on there. And I get it. I think a lot of brands did it because I honestly think TikTok was incentivizing a lot of brands to do it as well too. Particularly, I think it was the same thing when TikTok was around and was paying creators to go on the platform, right? And a lot of people actually don't know that. Like a lot of the big players, a lot of people, and I'm not saying everybody, right? But a good amount of people got paid to be on TikTok, right? Just like a lot of people are going to get paid to be on the next social media platform and the next social media platform. These platforms understand that we need people on here. Not for nothing, we need y'all on here to curate these algorithms and to get people excited about it, so then we can eventually go, use that and sell the data for ad revenue. Because at the end of the day, if the app is free, then you're the customer, right? That's really how that works, right? And so at the end of the day, I just want beauty brands to understand that you should be diversifying your marketing channels. You need to own the communication that you have with your clients and your customers more so than anything. And something also that I want to really specifically talk about is, I think now more than ever, we can agree that everybody is really overexposed, right? Brands included. And I think sometimes brands are a little bit over the top with it. We saw a lot of that with the Brat Summer phenomenon that, happened, shout out to Charlie XCX. But when the brands really started getting into Brat Summer, I was like, this is over. Like, this is 1,001% over, because when you're getting brands a part of it, there's this corporatized feeling about it that just takes the soul out of it. And someone who has worked in corporate for 8 months, a relatively short 8 months, the amount of reviews, the amount of things that you have to go through just to put the graphic out is ridiculous. So that should already let you know that trends and things that happen, sure, they're great, but as a brand, I really think you need to be focusing on creating your own trends, right? I think you need to focus on being original, Like, I keep saying how I just feel like the beauty industry is so boring and predictable, and I'm just so tired of everybody jumping on the exact same trend that everybody is jumping on. Now, I get it. This year is, especially at the top of this year, I've seen at least 3 brands launch a mascara, right? And that's probably just where the climate of beauty is. I'm sure there are insights that are being put in place, especially for the brands that are at Sephora and certain things like that. Hey, this is going to be the new top SKU for the new year. Make sure you're kind of in line with that. I saw Live Tinting come out with the mascara. House Labs came out with the mascara in December. There was another brand I can't remember right now that is launching a mascara as well too. I think it was it might have been Merit. I could be wrong. But at the end of the day, so many people are following the exact same blueprint, and it's fine, because I think, again, if you know that this is going to be the forecast, or this is going to be the, where things are going, it pays off, I think, sometimes to kind of be ahead of that sometimes and figure out a way about how we're going to do this in our way. However, I just think, or was it Live Tinted that came out with a mascara, or is it eyeliner? Lord, I can't remember. But it's one of those things where everyone's kind of doing the exact same thing, and it does feel repetitive and it does feel boring. So I also think if that's going to be the case, we might as well really solidify ourselves on particular platforms or on particular things and share those things out there in the best way that we know how, on the right particular platforms. Like, we've seen long form content really kind of take off. So if you're a brand that really wants to prioritize long form, maybe you should try YouTube, right? Maybe you should try Substack. I know Substack is also creating capabilities for people to do that as well too. But I also think Substack is paying a bunch of brands as well too to be on there, because I see so many brands launching Substacks, right? And I could do a whole podcast about that too. But it's so interesting to me how everyone's doing the exact same thing, and it just creates this space of like an echo chamber almost. And I get it. Every brand is going to do what they need to do to make money, right? I get it. Y'all are not running a nonprofit. We need to make money. However, I just want some originality, and I just want people to stop panicking and realizing at the end of the day that we've got to diversify strategically. And I would even, throw in and say exclusively, because I think now more than ever, people are so gravitated towards, kind of being in the in crowd, right? Kind of being in the team, kind of being in the group chat, right? And Topicals did a really cool thing with their close friends, kind of creating a group chat campaign for one of their most recent launch and their most recent brand trips. But again, it's like, how do you do it in a way that is very aligned with what it is that you're doing, almost so much that it doesn't seem like, we're just following the trends of what it is that everybody else is doing, or I'm just going to go on TikTok because everyone's on TikTok. It's like, okay, but is your customer base there, right? And I get it. You might want to put, your product into the hands of a new customer base. However, sometimes we kind of get lost in who it is that we're actually kind of speaking to, and your customer base might feel like, okay, well, what about us? You know what I mean? And I think it's always going to be trial and error when you're running a business. You're constantly doing things differently. You're constantly testing things out. I think TikTok was a great opportunity for a lot of brands, but as a business owner, if you're not thinking to yourself, okay, how do we ensure that we're not relying on certain platforms to get the job done? Or, how do we ensure that we can talk to our people and still have this be a fun and exciting atmosphere? And who knows? I have no idea where the new platform, when I say the new platform, I'm already talking into the new. I have no idea where TikTok is going to go. I have no idea what is going to happen. However, I'm really intrigued to see how brands react and what they do in this time where they've kind of lost out on this channel and are willing to hopefully get them outside of their comfort zone a little bit, because I think TikTok put a lot of people in their comfort zone and it was a really great thing. And I'm already talking about it like it's already out of here, but I also think this should just be a warning for anybody that nothing is forever and nothing is permanent, especially if you don't own it. Especially if you do not own it. And last but not least, y'all, I did want to just talk about some beauty predictions and some marketing strategies for you guys. I know a lot of you guys watching as because I'm filming video, but also listening, you want to know, okay, you're talking about brands going bankrupt, you're talking about changes to platforms. What should we actually be doing? And that's why I'm here. And because I love talking about marketing and business and all that good stuff, you know me, I'm always going to come through with some actual tangible things for y'all so you actually understand what I'm saying. So now more than ever, I think for 2025, I mean, this is a little bit of a prediction / a continued thing that we've been seeing brands do, which is curated, intimate, activity-based experiences, whether you're doing them monthly, whether you're doing them quarterly, and really kind of using this as an opportunity to connect with your customer base in a way that you probably haven't been able to before, and kind of turning those community members into customers, or those customers into community members. It's interesting. I think it's definitely more customers to community, because I think half the battle when you have people that love your products, or when you have people that love what you do, and you bring us all together, in a room, and we're playing pickleball, or we're creating, a version of the product that is more personalized. You're creating these kind of intimate experiences with people that I think we're wanting even more of now more than ever, because people are isolated. Today's quote unquote Gen Z person is feeling like, I'm on the phone all the time, I'm scrolling TikTok all the time, I'm seeing all these things, and I want to be included. And I think the brands have been really great at doing this. I mentioned topicals earlier, but Summer Fridays, I've seen them do this incredibly well, with their community, Pilates class, creating, pizza joints that are very curated and very fun. Lucky Girl Rosé is another brand that comes to mind, creating these very intimate, almost like exclusive experiences for people, right? And that's really what it is people want to feel included now more than ever. And so it's like, as a brand, what are you doing to ensure that you are creating very inclusive experiences for people, and things that are not just necessarily a brand event where everyone's taking photos and, we're getting a cute photo op for the gram. It's like, no, I'm actually doing an activity. I'm actually doing something that is furthering my creativity or furthering my understanding for a brand, right? Whether it's going to the lab, whether it is, again, I'm going to bring up topicals. They did cooking classes, I remember, as well too, because I think this was around the time they were advertising their new like butter spray that they have, and just things that are just different than what we've already seen. I mean, Rode also did, this photo booth, really cool, almost like vending machine type activation. It's literally like a traveling pop-up that they take, and they took it kind of all over the city as well too, where they curated some really awesome spaces for new launches that they had. And so again, people are still going to want their cute photo op, people are still going to want to have that memento, but they still want an opportunity to do things that are really fun and exciting with the team, with the founder, and that's going to show us that we're just not, it's not just about us buying things, right? Like, give us kind of the influencer treatment, but for customers and for those community members as well too. So I definitely think that's going to be a prediction faux show. Another thing I wanted to talk about, and this kind of, bleeds into the first one that I mentioned, is all about laying the red carpet out for your customers and your clients, getting the influencer experience, which again, I mentioned this, and again, I'm not going to say death to the influencer because I do not think that's the case. However, the influencer that is just all about talking about, I'm getting this, I'm getting that, but like always, like kind of almost to the point where it's a little bit annoying. That's definitely over. But I also think people have kind of felt like over the years, influencers have just been doing things for a check. They're probably been doing things because they got, paid for it, or they got products sent to them or whatnot. And I think brands also are getting smart. And that's always a thing, is like, there's such a tumultuous relationship between influencers and brands. However, I think most people need to understand and realize that the brands, yes, need influencers, but they don't need all of y'all, right? And the brands are being very, very specific and selective about who it is that they're working with, and are also more inclined to work with people who they've worked with before versus always going new. And so outside of the influencer marketing industry kind of changing a little bit, bit by bit, yes, it's still incredibly booming, but the influencers that are really the ones who are creating ROI, and sometimes that ROI is sales. Those are the things that brands are really going to look for now more than ever. But I wanted to talk about the laying out the red carpet, because influencers are the ones that are getting all the swag bags, or getting the invites to New York Fashion Week. They're the ones that are showing up and showing out. And, yes, customers are seeing this on their page, and sometimes they are engaged and sometimes they're not, right? And I think now more than ever, brands realize, especially if you're an indie brand, like, you have the opportunity to actually cultivate, real relationships with your customers and your community, and really allow them to get the treatment that you would maybe give to an influencer, which you probably have to pay up the wazoo, and you probably don't have those funds as of yet. But now you get the opportunity to kind of give your actual customers, who are the ones that are actually, paying for your product, and the ones that are actually, allowing the business to be what it is. So I think brands, if they're smart, are going to do things for their customers that is on the same level of an influencer as well too, and still give them perks, right? Still give them opportunities to make money and create a life that they want in alignment with a brand that they love, right? And that brand loyalty is going to be big now more than ever, because the people that love brands and really, really love what they do, those are the ones that are going to be incentivized more than ever. Those are the ones that are going to be in the photo shoots. Those are the ones that are going to be in the campaigns. Those are the ones that are going to get the invites to when, last year, every brand, when it was the Eras Tour concert or Sabrina Carpenter's concert, they booked out a box and brought in a bunch of people, and it was a great influencer moment. But I think brands are going to start doing those for customers as well too, or at least giving customers kind of like, again, that laid out red carpet where, yeah, you can get the opportunity to be in with us as well too, right? It's not so much, oh, we're the big brand and we only want to work with influencers and, X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, we really want to cultivate genuine community. And I've seen so many brands do this really well. I believe last year Refi did this with one of their brand trips, where they opened up the floor to, I think it was a certain amount of spaces on the trip that customers could actually get the opportunity to be, in the actual influencer trip. And I loved it because it was just dope, and a bunch of people talked about it. But I think it was so important that a brand like that kind of gives you this sense of like, yes, it's only influencers and whatnot, but they do a really great job at UGC. So it only kind of made sense. And there's ways to do it that is very strategic. Like, don't get me wrong, y'all. Brands are not just picking any random customer off the street. Now, let's take it back, right? Brands are being very strategic about the types of people that they are inviting into their world. However, if you are somebody who, again, is loyal, has loved the brand, constantly showing how much you value what the brand is doing, you talk about them, like, these are things that brands are paying attention to now more than ever, right? So I get it. On the influencer side, you might think, oh, the brands need us. Ish. The brands, yes, understand that they need you, but they're not just going to give you free product or let you into their world if they don't feel like the exchange has kind of been there from the get-go, right? It's all about being authentic and organic. Something else that I wanted to talk about a lot was, very aligned products and merch. I think I talked about this last year as well too, but now more than ever, again, people might be more inclined to find out about your brand before you even go and, tell them about a product, right? You might have a sweater, you might have tees, you might have bags, totes, hats. Like, there could be so many other things that could get people excited about your brand before they even learn that you have product. Or it could just be, whoa, I really love that sweater. Who is this brand? What is it about? And now I get an introduction into your product as well. And so I think, again, now more than ever, people might not necessarily be inclined to buy a serum, or they might not be inclined to buy a cream or SPF or mascara, blush, whatever it might be, especially if they're not the most, they've already have what they have and that's what it is. However, most people today are going to be more inclined if you've got a really cool merch drop, or you have this really cool product. And I was just talking to my girlfriend about this yesterday, where it's like, you have this incredible product and that's great, but a lot of people are very skeptical about certain things and certain products, especially for their first time. But they might be way more inclined to try a tool, or they might be more inclined to buy a sweater or shoes or a water bottle or something that creates a little bit more of, it lets me know, oh, I can keep this thing in my life and I have adjacency to the brand, but it's not necessarily me having the product. But they'd be way more inclined to, go back and say, okay, let me go check out the products even further. Or, I really, really want that bag, but I have to spend $125 to get it. And most people will go ahead and do that because people like extra gifts. It's why gift with purchases are absolutely, that's what everybody is doing, because they realize most people don't have an issue about paying per se, but they do want a little extra something off the top. And if that means I get this really cool merch item, then they're going to be way more inclined to go ahead and do that. And I've just seen a lot more brands just say, hey, we want to do things differently. Like Solid Core came out with a challenge and said everybody who competes in this challenge and does really well gets our limited edition merch. And even things like that, adding a very exclusive, limited edition tag or a very small stock, so that you're not just creating product for the sake of creating product, I think is so smart and so great. It's like when brands say, you come to the pop-up and get first dibs on this new launch that we have. Like, it's things like that that create urgency and that let people know that you're actually thinking and actually are wanting to have some fun with what it is that you're doing in your business. And last but not least, I wanted to talk about two of these things that I think are really interesting, which is all about exclusive membership only incentives and perks. I think loyalty and, membership programs and certain things like that have been really awesome to see. However, I think it's really interesting that people have, really said to themselves, like, I want in, right? I want to opt in, whether it's email, whether it's, something like Try Your Best. Like, there's so many things that people have said that I don't like. I need to get that token, right? Or I need to get, that, a certain amount of points so I can be one of the first to know that this launch is happening. Like, there's so many things that happen within this space of brands really wanting to create, incentivize things for their kind of members only club. And so we're seeing that more than ever, brands even saying, hey, like when you go on their site, yes, you could pay full price, but if you're a member, you could pay this price, right? Or if you're a member, you'll get to, be one of the first to shop whatever it is that we have coming up, or a new launch, or to get samples, or anything that just lets people know that you really value that they are part of this club that you've kind of created. And it's really interesting because I feel like brands and platforms like Geneva were really kind of pivotal in this. But I also think Try Your Best is probably the best platform that's doing that right now, where they kind of give people this incentivized, token or, specific perks that are really cool and fun. And they kind of just, I don't want to say disguise, but they kind of essentially create challenges for people. And these challenges are all like really fun and really exciting and probably things that you would normally do anyway, but now have an incentive to do them even further. And it gives people, kind of an inside scoop to things that they probably haven't been able to have before. And so as a brand, if you're not saying to yourself, like, how do we, turn our customers into lifetime members, right? Or how do we turn our customers into these loyal community members that can really be our biggest advocates, so that we can actually feel like we don't necessarily have to sell all the time, because we have a community of people who are genuine and want to share their love for the brand and for our products. And last but not least, I wanted to talk about cross-selling opportunities. I was reading an article about this the other day in Glossier talking about brands who, have found ways to collab and partner that sometimes you wouldn't even expect. And I think it's really cool because they've been doing this a lot with indie and very niche related brands as well too. And it's just a testament at the end of the day how important it is as a brand that you stick to exactly what it is that you're about and say to yourself, if we might not necessarily want to create a new SKU, or we might not necessarily want to, and when I say SKU, I don't, it's not something that you have to have forever, right? It could just be something that you have for a short amount of time for a particular type of purpose. And you have the opportunity now to cross-sell, right? So much so that, again, you don't necessarily have to be the only one talking about people buying your product as a brand. You can now rely on the fact that you have an aligned partnership with another brand that is doing something really cool and exciting, and you can find a way to be into that. Merit probably was one of the best brands that I saw that do this. This was a couple years ago. It was around the holidays, and they had partnerships with a bunch of, again, aligned beauty brands and, fashion brands and some, again, just really cool companies. And I feel like Merit, they've exploded and done so many different things. I mean, to the point now where they're almost like a lifestyle brand, but they created some really cool opportunities for people that it was like, hey, purchase this certain amount of money and get this cool gift with purchase. And this gift with purchase was like a makeup item for a different brand, or a clothing item, or a jewelry piece, or something that, again, is very in line with what the brand was doing, but it still had an opportunity for people to get, to get perks, or to get like this really cool item from a different brand that they probably always wanted, but now they get an opportunity to do so. And you've given people now an extra reason to actually shop and actually, say, hey, directly, don't necessarily buy this, but if you do, you get this really cool thing on the other end. And I think that is what people are more excited for more than anything, outside of the fact of collabs and partnerships and certain things like that. It's, if we're going to do those things, let's really make sure that those things give an opportunity for people to be aware of different brands and different things that they're doing, so that it doesn't always just necessarily feel like we have to just keep selling and selling and selling. Because again, today, the average person doesn't necessarily want to be sold to. However, if you do the right partnership or the right cross-promotion selling opportunity with the right brand or the right individual, that could put your brand into the hands of the ideal customer that you've probably been looking for, or open up your brand to a whole other group of people. But I think most brands today do things in a way that are just very strategic. So I love it. But let's make sure that we're also doing it with brands that I think just people wouldn't expect. And I did a whole post about this last year, might have been the year before, about brands that did really unexpected collaborations. And they were really cool, and they were really innovative and really dope. And you probably wouldn't, fully expect these brands to come together. But when you do, it creates a moment, right? And we can kind of create this lore and this kind of culture around it. And I think that's really what people are attracted to now more than ever, is the unexpected, the unpredictable and innovative, right? And going back to what I was saying about me just kind of feeling like the beauty industry is kind of losing a little bit of its luster, but I have hope, because I do think indie brands, aside from the fact that they definitely need help with scaling, are some of the most innovative brands coming out with the most innovative things. So I just hope and pray that those brands get the funding they deserve, get the opportunity to, be in the right space and at the right time with the right people. And I'm just so passionate about this stuff because I work with so many indie brands, and I'm just so impressed with the things that they come out with. But the only thing that's stopping them, or even stopping you, is you just feeling like you can't get into the hands of the right people. But that just means you got to just be a little extra scrappier. And that just means at the end of the day, you got to make a decision about what type of brand you're actually trying to build. Are you trying to build for longevity? Or are you trying to build, and when I say longevity, I mean, are you trying to build to have this brand for the rest of your life? Or do you eventually want to sell and do want to bring in investors and bring in private equity, which, as I mentioned prior to, is always a little bit of a gamble. But at the end of the day, I think there's ways to do it strategically. And I'll just be really interested to see the brands that are able to capitalize on it and, soar amidst a TikTok ban and other social media apps, letting us know exactly how it is that they roll. So without further ado, y'all, thank you so much for joining me for another episode of What's New in Beauty. It's a bit of a long one today, but I was just super passionate and I wanted to get into a bunch of things. You can tell I'm a little rusty, but my goal is to come back monthly and give you guys, beauty insights, my thoughts, strategies, even some just other things. I have so many dreams, and I have so many, I have so many things in my mind that I want to kind of check off with this podcast. And, I've been really grateful that you guys have been rocking with me and still downloading and still listening. And so I appreciate y'all so, so much. And I'll catch you in the next one.